Hello, my name is Matthew Hine. I'm the Chief Product Officer at RDX Works. Wanted to talk today to the Scriptonauts and talk to you about what is a decentralized application or a dApp, and specifically, what is a dApp on Radix. We've just recently released the Radix betanet for our Babylon network release, and that brings with it a lot of new tools that allows our developer community to start building a fully featured dApp on Radix using all the tools that we provide. So I wanted to provide an overview that talks about when I say a dApp, what does that really mean? What are you building as a developer? What tools do you have to work with? And generally, what sorts of functionality can you provide with this sort of dApp? Maybe the first place to start here is just talking about what is a dApp in general. Well, as I said, it's a decentralized dApp. So for those of you who aren't already deeply embedded in Web3 and DeFi and that kind of stuff, the decentralized part of a dApp or a decentralized app is that a critical part of the system runs on a decentralized network, like Radix. The entire system doesn't run on that network, but there's a critical part of it that needs to run on that decentralized network because that network provides some capabilities that you can't get any other way. And I would say that the most concise way of putting that capability is it's all about digital ownership. It's the idea that an individual person can hold all of their stuff in an open way. They can hold their own stuff and it isn't tied to any particular application. They could take it with them wherever they go. And their ownership doesn't rely on some third party to define what they own and what they don't own. That sounds very vague, but it has some really specific and unique capabilities. You know, if you want to build a financial application in the Web 2 model today, it basically means that your ownership in that system has to be defined through the traditional banking system. So to build an application, you need to have access to that banking infrastructure, which is obviously an extraordinarily high bar for someone that has a great idea of building a better way of doing finance for people. And this is why a lot of people are excited about DeFi or decentralized finance. Going to another extreme, maybe you're just building a game. You're building something where you want to build a really compelling experience for users, but you want to make the things that they get out of that game feel more tangible than just sort of, well, I log in and I can see it in my backpack inside the game. Users, we've found, would really like to be able to take these things with them so that even when they log out of your game, they can still see the gold and the sword and all the stuff that they want in the game. They really feel like they own that stuff in a meaningful sense. It's held in their own wallet in the same way that they would hold cash in their own wallet. There's no question that they own it, but they can bring it to your application and do really interesting stuff there. And maybe it can even move across applications, which is a really important part of Web3 and DeFi in general. This idea of being able to take your digital ownership and move between applications seamlessly. We talk about this quite a bit in our RadFi presentation, talking about what kinds of applications we think can come out of this. Highly encourage you to watch that video to get a more complete idea of why Web3 is so exciting and the viewpoint we're taking on those applications. But to come back to the point at hand, a dApp that needs to interact with a decentralized ledger to provide some of this digital ownership capability obviously needs to be built in a little bit different way than you would build a typical web app today. Now, there's a lot of commonality still. We're not throwing everything out the window, but there are some specific things you have to do. Obviously, there's the on-ledger component, and you need to interact with that on-ledger component. You also need to be able, if users are going to have their own ownership of things, you have to interact with their stuff in some way, and that happens through a wallet. This is something that's already done on Ethereum today as an example, where there's MetaMask is by far the most popular wallet there, and you can connect MetaMask to a dApp webpage and you can do stuff with an account. So that general pattern is something that is what people are getting excited about in Web3 and DeFi, but Radix is taking a little bit of a different approach to it. When we look at Web3 as it is today on Ethereum and other networks, what we find is that it's difficult to build those applications, and the user experience in the end is really pretty awful. So we've taken a different approach. We're providing a different set of tools, and there's a little bit of a different pattern of building a dApp on Radix that I'm going to tell you a little bit about here. So let's move on. To show you an overview of what a dApp is on Radix, I'm first going to start from the user's perspective. So if you're building an application for your users and they're connecting to your dApp, what does that mean? What's their experience when they connect? And it would look something like this. In the end, their user experience, from their point of view, they're connecting to a web page. It's kind of simple as that. And that's why they call it Web 3. It's a new way of interacting with web pages that can do some unique things. So obviously this could be a website in your desktop browser. It could be a website in your mobile browser. And on Radix, the wallet that you use to connect to those things is a mobile application. And that wallet is a really critical part of the picture for your users, because the wallet is the thing that takes care of their stuff. The Radix wallet manages quite a bit of stuff for the user's benefit that moves across applications with them. So they have this really concrete feeling of, I know what I own, I'm in control of how I connect and what information that I share. So the Radix wallet keeps track of things like what accounts does the user control? What assets are they holding in those accounts? When you have to do transactions where you're going to be sending assets around and interacting with things, then those transactions are going to be approved in the Radix wallet so the users have confidence that they're in control. And it also contains things like personas and personal data that we include, which provides a really nice login experience that I'll talk about a little bit later. So from the user's perspective, they're visiting your website, your dApp website, and they're connecting their Radix wallet to that. So they're saying, this is an application I want to use, and I want to bring my stuff to that application, my assets, my accounts. I want to do transactions with it. I want to log in with my persona. The Radix wallet on my phone is going to enable me to do that stuff. But really, the primary user experience of that application is the user experience that you define in your web application. It just needs to know how to connect to the website. So you can see here on this diagram, and this doesn't go into a lot of detail, but the Radix wallet has the capability of connecting both to desktop browser dApps as well as mobile browser dApps. This is capability we're building into the wallet. We're starting with desktop browser because we find that this is what most of what people want to do with DeFi today, but we're going to be moving to also enabling mobile browser applications. And we use a technology called Radix Connect that allows the user to really seamlessly connect their mobile phone to their desktop browser. You can read more about that in some other places. So, from the user's perspective, once again, they connect to your website, they connect the Radix wallet there, and then in the end, that Radix wallet is also connecting to the Radix network. The wallet sort of owns the user's connection. If there's a transaction to be done, they're signing it and the wallet submits that to the network. The wallet is going to the network to say, hey, what stuff do I really own? What are my accounts? What are my identities? All that stuff is on the Radix network, held securely there in a way where they can bring it wherever they want, and they're always in full control of it. This is a really huge thing for users. Okay. But there's more to it than this picture, obviously. It's not just building a website, because obviously you need to build this stuff that can interact with digital ownership. And so I'm going to split decentralized applications on Radix into these two major classes that I'm going to talk about in a little more detail. The first class is the pure front-end dApp, and the other one is the full stack dApp. So I'm going to start with the pure front-end dApp, and then we can expand that a little bit to show you what the bigger picture full stack dApp looks like. The pure front-end dApp looks kind of like this. And you can see this is color-coded a little bit. So the stuff that's in the green boxes, this is stuff that you as the dApp developer are going to be building in there. This is what you're responsible. This is the stuff that is unique to your application. The stuff in blue boxes are basically provided tools. These are things that the RDX Works team has developed. It's the Radix network. It's it's infrastructure and tools that you can rely on that you don't have to implement yourself. And there's quite a bit of stuff that's provided here. And you can kind of break this pure front-end app into these three major portions. The one at the top is the Radix wallet. And then there's also something here I call the connector. So the connector is the thing that's running as kind of a background browser extension that enables this really easy connection between the Radix wallet on the mobile phone with a desktop browser. On mobile, it's going to be deep linking, so there's no browser extension in the middle. And this is basically, this part of it, the Radix wallet part of it is the part that the user owns. They've downloaded this wallet, or maybe if they're coming to your application for the first time, you might direct them to say, hey, go download the Radix wallet and then come back here. So they own all that stuff. They're holding their stuff there. They've set that up on their own. And we're going to make that really easy to use. And once again, in our RadFi presentation, you can get a very clear idea of what that wallet user experience is going to be like. The second part of it is the dApp front end itself. And in some ways, this is kind of similar to what you might be used to in Web 2. It's a web page. This is a website that you're building. You might be building this in TypeScript or Svelte or one of those sorts of tools. It's a typical web front end. And then we've got some tools that you can build in here that facilitates a connection between that website and other parts in the system. I'll come back to that. And obviously, the third major component here is the Radix network part of it. And specifically, there's something that's called the gateway, which is it's an endpoint you use to connect to the network and read information from it and interact with it. So the gateway, there's a gateway that's being run by the Radix team. Third parties can set up their own gateways. Application builders might want to run their own gateway that sort of connects directly to the network and provides that API. So this basic pattern of wallet, website front end, and the network is actually quite similar in a lot of ways to what you'd see on Ethereum if you're familiar with building a dApp there. If you're familiar with Uniswap, for example, similar pattern. Uniswap is basically, there's a set of smart contracts. I call them components here. This is what we call them on Radix, but on most networks, they would call this smart contracts. That's running some of this automation around the assets that are on the ledger. Then there's a website that you load in your browser, which provides a nice interface to that, and you connect your wallet to that interface. So again, if you're familiar with Ethereum, the basic concept here isn't too different. If you're new to the idea of dApps from the beginning, if you come from the Web 2 world, this might seem a little bit weird to you because you're going, well, like, where's the back end of the system? Where's the server component of my application? I'm going to get to that. The full stack dApp actually concludes that. But one of the cool things that you can do with a dApp is you can build a pretty robust application without necessarily needing your own server-based backend. And the way that happens is that basically the stuff on the Radix network can kind of act like a backend. It's basically decentralized infrastructure that's available to anyone, and you can load these dApp components, which are, once again, are basically our form of smart contracts. You can write those smart contracts or components in our smart contract language called Scrypto, and you can load those onto the Radix network, and that becomes basically business logic that's always available on the network that your front end and your users can interact with. So if you imagine something like Uniswap, which Uniswap is basically just a currency exchange. I can swap one kind of token for another kind of token. If you built that in the Web 2 model, well, you'd have some kind of server backend which was keeping track of who owns what things, and maybe you're interfacing to some banking system stuff to actually do transfers of assets. And so your web front end would connect to an API perhaps in your backend, which would be implementing all that logic of how can you do swaps and who owns what. Well, with a decentralized system like this, ownership is handled by the network itself. Ownership is a concept that the network understands, particularly on Radix, where we have network native ideas of assets and accounts and these sorts of things. And then the business logic of, okay, here's how I want to do a swap between one type of token for another. Well, you can write that in some very simple sets of smart contract components, load that onto the network, and now your front end and the wallet can interact with that stuff directly through transactions. And so one of the major parts of building the front end is dealing with transactions. The basic flow here is that your front end will construct a transaction that kind of describes something you want to have happen around digital ownership. So once again, to take the exchange example, you might build a transaction that says, hey, my user wishes to swap 10 of token A for whatever the market rate is of token B right now. You can build a transaction manifest stub, is what we call it in Radix. It's a very clear description of what you want to have happen. It basically says 10 of token A comes out of my user's account. It then goes into a dApp component, which does the swap. And then the return from that is some B tokens, which you then deposit back into the user's account. So your front end will present a user interface to do that stuff, will build a transaction manifest stub that describes that, and then sends that to the Radix wallet. And the user can then see, yes, that is indeed what I was expecting. I can see that this describes a swap between these two tokens. That's what I want. They can submit that to the network, which is this line, and then the network processes that to make sure that everything was done correctly. So this is a really nice system to build very powerful functionality in a fairly simple way. And we provide tools to do this. So if you're building your front end, there is a gateway SDK, and that provides you with a nice sort of JavaScript native way of doing state queries, we call them, to the Radix gateway network, or the gateway to the network. So you can look up things like, how many tokens does this user's account have in it right now, so that you can present that in your user interface. It can read all that information and do useful things to build your user interface. And then ultimately, there's a wallet SDK, which will help you interface to the wallet part of it. So it has a nice transaction manifest builder, which allows you to construct that manifest stub. And then it has an interface that allows you to push that to the wallet. You can also make requests to the wallet, and we go into this more in the documentation, but you can ask the user's connected wallet to say, hey, can you tell me the list of accounts that you wish to use with my application so that I have those addresses so that you can query the network and read some information about that. There's a lot more information about the sorts of queries that you can do in our documentation. We also provide a Radix Connect button. So this is sort of a convenience thing that sits on top of the wallet SDK and basically provides a consistent user experience for connecting a Radix wallet to your dApp. It basically visually takes the appearance of a button that you can put in the upper right-hand corner or something like that of your web page, but it has some intelligence built into it. So it sort of provides a clear way for the user to go, I can see that this is a website where I can connect my wallet. And when they click that button, they have a consistent user interface of connecting their wallet up to your application, seeing what sorts of information they're sharing and all that kind of stuff. So these are all things that we're providing that you can import into your front-end project, and then you can build whatever sort of application you want around these things. That's the pure front-end dApp. And in Web3 today, that's basically all the applications there are basically follow this pattern. And we certainly expect there'll be quite a number of applications on Radix that will also follow this pattern, except that we believe that we have these much nicer tools, a much better wallet experience, and some more robust tools that will allow you to build these things in a way that's predictable and powerful. In fact, one thing, a note for Ethereum developers, is you might have noticed that there's a little bit of a difference here. With MetaMask is basically your application's interface for everything. If you're reading information from the network or the wallet, everything goes through that pipeline. We changed that model a little bit on Radix. This is why we provide you the Gateway SDK, which allows you to connect to the gateway yourself, irrespective of the user's wallet, and whatever choices they make about where they're connecting their wallet. For example, you can run your own gateway and have your application connect to your gateway. Or maybe you just want to make your own decisions about what gate you want to use. Maybe you want to build a customized gateway that serves queries in a very particular way for your application. This allows you to make that decision for yourself rather than being locked into what the wallet wants to provide you, which is one of the issues with MetaMask today. Okay, so this is the pure front-end application. The other type of application, the full stack app, dApp, starts with the same basic stuff, but adds on an expanded scope. And it looks something like this. What we've done here is we've now added a dApp backend. If you come from the Web 2 world, this is now probably moving into your happy place. This is your comfort zone now, where if you ignore the network part of it, this is the traditional Web 2 structure where you've got a front end, it talks to some sort of server-based backend. And the reason why you need that is because there's some sort of a database of information that you need to keep track of about your users. Now, again, one of the cool things is you have access to the network where all the stuff that interacts with the ownership and automation of that sort of asset transfer logic, all that stuff belongs on the network in the form of smart contracts. However, there's still some stuff that you might want to use a traditional server-based backend for. And a big part of what that comes from is the need for user management. So if you look at something like Uniswap today and Web3 today, there really is no such thing as user management. You never log into an application. All you do is you show up and you say, hey, here's an account that I want to transact with. It provides you with a user interface, and then you can do some transactions out of that account. That doesn't solve all problems, though. So if you think about, what if we wanted to build a more decentralized Web3 version of Twitter or Amazon or something like that? All of those applications have really good reasons why you need to be able to log into that application, where the application needs to have its own notion of, I can see this is a Twitter user and they have a post history on my platform, or they've got user preferences on my platform, or they've got a purchase history on my platform. There's reasons why they need to have their own user database, and they need to have a good, secure way of the user logging into that system so they can keep track of that user and provide them with a nice experience. That doesn't go away with Web3. This is still a really important pattern for in a lot of systems, and so we need to have a way of building this in a more Web3 sense. The other reason why you might want to have a dApp backend here is for asset management. So what I mean by that is, once again, if all of the asset ownership and sort of the logic of moving those things is run on the network, your backend system might want to interact with the network to do that stuff. So, for example, imagine you're building a Web3 game, and user comes to your platform, they connect their account, they log in with this persona-based system that I'll talk about, and you want to have it such that all of their user identity in the game, like their character sheet and the stuff they own, all that kind of stuff, is held in their wallet. Well, you're still going to want to interact with that. Your system is going to want to say, hey, they just looted this dungeon that they raided, and so they need to now receive 100 gold coins. Well, your system is going to need to submit a transaction to the network where 100 gold coins are being created, or they're being pulled out of a reserve and are then being sent to that user's wallet. That doesn't go through the user's wallet because they don't need to approve that transaction. It's just your system saying, I want to send that to the user. Or maybe you just want to manage your use of smart contracts where you want to reconfigure some things. Those are all good reasons why you might want to have an asset management system running in your server-based backend. So for this kind of application, all the stuff we talked about before in the pure front-end app still applies, but in this case, we need to have this idea of signed challenges, which comes from our persona-based login system. I won't go into too much depth about that because we've got some good documentation on this, but basically speaking, when a user logs into a Radix application, we can do that without a password. And the way that happens is that the Radix wallet can produce a unique challenge response. It's a cryptographic message, if you will, that basically tells the application, here's who I'm claiming to be, and here is proof that I am who I say I am. And it uses an on-ledger mechanism that we've built. So we have something called a user identity, which corresponds to a persona they have in their wallet. So when they say, I want to log in here with my public persona or my private account or my lurker account or whatever it is, there's a user identity on the ledger, which I can create that challenge against. I can pass that challenge to the front end. It can then pass it to the dApp backend, to your user management system. And we have something called ROLA, which stands for Radix off-ledger authentication, which can then look at the ledger and verify against that identity. Has that person sufficiently proved that they are who they say they are? If so, it would send a response back to the front end saying, yep, you can consider that user logged in, maybe using sort of a traditional login token or something like that. And your user management system can then update information on that user and all the traditional things you might be used to. And then obviously you can also use the Gateway SDK here, just like the front end does, where if you need to do state queries or even submit transactions to the ledger directly from the back end, you can do that here as well. So this then becomes a very robust, flexible system for building, anything you can build in Web 2, you can build in Web 3 better with this system. You can build a system where users can be more in control of their assets. They can be in control of their login, but you can provide that without having to do email address and password, which is horribly insecure. And you generally give the user more confidence that they're engaging in a system that's much more flexible and powerful. So that's the basic picture. There's quite a bit more detail about this, and I'll put this back. So you can go to developers.radixdlt.com if you generally want to kind of get involved with the developer ecosystem on Radix. Our Discord channel is a great place to go to get your questions answered. If you want documentation on this pattern for how you build applications, if you're ready to get started with building a front end, building Scrypto-based smart contracts, we now have a documentation site specifically for the features of the Babylon network, which is what we're going to be migrating our mainnet to. And that's what our betanet right now is running, is the Babylon version of these tools. So if you go to babylon-docs.radixdlt.com, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Docs. Is that right? Yeah. If you go to docs-babylon.radixdlt.com, you'll find our documentation site specifically for Babylon. You'll see some great getting started guides that explain what I talked about here in a little bit more detail. You'll see there, you'll be able to see how to get an early developer version of the Radix wallet that you'll be able to connect to your application for testing. You'll see where you can get started with Scrypto components and how you can start building applications in this new mode. So we're really looking forward to seeing you in your community and answering your questions and getting you started, because we think that this is an incredibly powerful new model for building applications that we really think the world should pay attention to. So thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.